Okay, so in this video we're going to cover what is AV design. AV design is about conceiving of an audiovisual system that will meet the user's requirements while balancing all the considerations and constraints. So we are designing an AV system, obviously. But what are all these considerations and constraints? Well, first of all, we have the user's needs, which is paramount. What is actually required for this system? What does it need to do? How does it need to serve the users? But we also need to consider the competency of the users. So the kind of system that you put into a new tech startup's office versus what you put into a retirement home is going to be potentially different as far as the complexity of the system is concerned. And then also to consider whether the users are they going to be transient? Is this a public space with a lot of people who are going to be walking in and using the system for the first time? Or is there going to be staff that are specifically trained how to operate this system? All of these things do need to be factored in, as well as the larger organizational objectives. So the company that's purchasing this system, what are their goals? What is the value that they are trying to get out of the system? So we need to consider both the people in the space using it locally, but then also think about the larger organizational objectives of why they're spending money on this system. Then we have the architecture and the physical environment. So obviously the shape of the room, or what you need to fill, or the amount of audio coverage you need to have, is all going to be impacted by the shape and size of the room, as well as the acoustics. Is it a glass square box? You're going to have a lot of audio troubles there that you need to address, as well as the lighting. So do you have a light coming in the window and spilling onto the projection screen? Or the artificial lighting, do you have downlights placed directly above the projection screen that the light is going to hit on the screen? That is going to cause you problems. All of these things need to be considered, as well as do you have floor boxes? Do you have a way to get cabling to the table in the center of the room? Or does all of your connectivity need to be around the outside edges? So a large part of it is the architecture and the physical environment. Existing products and infrastructure, do they have some screens that need to be reused, or any hardware that they already own that they want to implement into the space, as well as their existing network? Will that support the AV over IP system you're thinking about using? Are they using Teams or are they using Zoom for their unified communication platform? Have they already invested in Extron control and management platforms? All of that existing infrastructure and existing decisions need to be factored into your system that is then going to be part of that organization. Security becoming a larger and larger aspect of it. Are you even allowed to put any equipment on their network? Sometimes that's a complete no-go and you need to do something completely separate from their corporate network. Or are the USB ports functional on their laptops? If they've got security policies that says that they can't use their USB connections on their laptops, it's no good you putting in a USB dongle to wirelessly share up to the screen, because that's not going to work in that environment. So security is becoming a bigger and bigger consideration in the design process. Clients' preferences and standards. You might be dealing with a team, whether that's the owner or the IT department, and their LG TV at home broke after 6 months, and now they've got a bee in their bonnet and they hate that brand and they don't never want to see it. I'm not picking on LG for any reason specifically. I just pulled it from the top of my head, but these preconceived biases will actually play into how they perceive your system. And so it's important that you understand if you're dealing with any of those, and the preferences may be less arbitrary than that, but if they have preferences, it's important that you're factoring those in, as well as standards. And so company standards, they may come in the form of, particularly if you're dealing with like a global entity that has offices all over the world, they may have a beautiful official standards, a nice document of explaining everything from user experience to products and brands. Or they might not have anything documented, but they may just use Barco ClickShare in every other office in the world. And so you don't want to go ahead and put a different product in than what they're already familiar with in all their other offices, particularly if you have people traveling between offices. So you want to pay attention to what standards and what technologies are already being used by the organization. Then we have aesthetics and identity. So the aesthetics of the system matter. If you're dealing with a public entity, they might not want to look like they have spent a lot of money on their AV system. It may have to look particularly utilitarian in what they're deploying. Whereas if you're dealing with a hotshot law firm in the middle of town, they want to signal that they're the cat's pajamas. They want something that says, "Hey, we're the business," and so they want something maybe a bit more extravagant that shows that they're the kind of the big fish in the pond, let's say. So the identity of the business that you're designing a system for also plays into what we consider when thinking about what is going to be the best solution for them. Budget. How much money have they got to spend? It's really critical that you understand, you have some idea of this going into the design process. You don't want to go ahead and design them a spaceship when they've only got enough money for a Fiat. You don't want to embarrass the client either. No one likes to be told that they don't have enough money to buy something. So it is important that you have some indication of where you are. And a lot of this falls more into the consultancy side of things, and we'll do separate course on consultancy and how we actually pull out this information out of the client. But yeah, budget is a factor on every single project, regardless of however many hundreds of millions of dollars they've got to spend. Budget is always a factor. And finally, user experience. All of these things, all of the user needs and requirements and the organizational objectives, none of that stuff actually touches on user experience. What is it like for the person using the system? And this often can be overlooked. It's a very easy thing to overlook, but really needs to be at the center of our thought process when we're designing. So how do we communicate the design? Now, we use drawings to show the space, schematics to show what equipment's in there, how it connects, written scopes to describe how the system's going to work, lists and schedules of the equipment, and 3D renders. I'm going through this very quickly because we have a separate module on drawings and then another separate module on schematics. So we'll go into a lot more detail in those videos. But essentially, these are the tools that we're using to communicate the design to the end client, to the people delivering the system, the integrators and the technicians, and also the wider consultancy teams. Design process. The design process is going to be quite different depending on where you're working, what kind of project that you're working on. So I've tried to make this kind of concise. So the client has a need. They need a training space. There's then a meeting to really discover what those needs are. What are those user requirements? Their needs analysis, so a discovery meeting to figure out what it is that they actually want. A conceptual design is created, so we know what you want. We believe this will answer and give you what you need for the space. You present that to the client. Is this actually what you want? Are we on the right track? Does the client buy into it? Maybe not. Maybe we missed something. So then we need to go back, adjust that conceptual design, bring it back through. Are they happy with it? Yes. So then we go from our conceptual design through to detailed design. Now there is actually another step in here with developed design if we're talking about a traditional construction process, but I've tried to again make this as concise as possible. So we then go into a more detailed design. Here is where we're now talking more with the architects. We're feeding back on the power and data we need. What's the structural things we need in place to deliver this system properly, as well as going into detail in our own system, the exact schematic, what products we're going to use, how is it all going to connect, and produce everything that's needed to install it. We then have an internal sign-off, so we look at it and have more sets of eyes run over it, make sure we haven't missed anything, make sure that it is it's a good functional working system. That should be presented to the client for sort of final sign-off. This is what's going to get built. Then that will be handed over to the delivery team. So there should be some handover to the project managers and the technicians so they can ask questions and really make sure that they have everything they need. If you've done your documentation right, you shouldn't need much of a handover if the documentation is all there. The system is then deployed by the installation team, and then after the installation there will be, usually there's some tweaks to the system. And there's no way that you can foresee every possible thing. There's too many variables, things that change on site. And so there are usually some little changes that happen to the system as part of the deployment process, part of the installation. So we want to go back to our drawings and update them and produce as-built drawings. So this is the system as it was built. So that's really important for both service people, but also for you. If you come back and you need to add some more screens to the system, you need to refresh the site in a couple of years' time, you want to have really good detailed plans of exactly every single cable, how everything's connected, how many inputs and outputs you've got spare. So that's an important step. And then the post-install review. So there should be some communication with the design team and the delivery team afterwards to say, hey guys, what went right? Did you like that new bracket that we used? No, it was terrible. Okay, we'll go back to the old ones. There should be some sort of feedback loop from the people that deploy it to the people that design it that can then feedback into the next design. Again, very high level, but this is kind of roughly what it looks like in most cases. So talking about the role of an AV designer, there's other things that it can include. So that might be going into the client meetings to help get those requirements correct and guide the client on what's possible. Again, touching on consultancy, but that can be an AV design role. The drawings, so going from concept to construction, the documents, scope of works documents, potentially the budgeting and pricing aspects. Research and development is always important. We need to be across all the products that are being delivered and discontinued and thinking about new ways of using those, as well as training internally inside of the organization. So that might be teaching salespeople about what it is that you're designing, what the new technologies are that we should be looking to deploy into the next project. Now, depending on the size of your organization, you might be doing all of these things, plus project management, maybe some programming as well if you're in a really small team. Or in a larger team, you might have individual people doing each one of these steps, or you may even have a completely separate department. So you've got a department doing the quoting, doing the estimation, and another department doing the drawings. You've got draftsmen doing that side of things. So each one of these elements can be completely separate departments potentially. So from the outside, AV design can look like a really purely technical affair, but as the word design implies, it's actually quite creative. So we're solving problems, we're balancing aesthetics and functionality, we're trying to imagine and conceptualize new ideas and solutions and abilities and finding innovative approaches to challenges, and also figuring out how to document and communicate those designs. Then we have the products. So if you think about it like a painter knows every color of paint he has at his disposal. But the AV designer is kind of working with this ever-evolving palette as products are being released, they're being updated, they're being discontinued every week, and you can only use the products that you're aware of. And there's so many different products out there, it's, I would dare say, near on impossible to know every single different box that's currently available. Luckily, that is something that the AV500 can help you with. Now, consultants versus integrators. Both consultants and AV designers play a part in the design process, and how much each party contributes differs on a project-to-project basis, but the consultant should be giving the integrator a clear understanding of what's required, and the integrator should be collaborating on the proposed design to review it, find enhancements and cost efficiencies. Now, if this is done right, this should be a win-win partnership with both entities working together as a team. Unfortunately, that's not quite how that goes down in a lot of cases, and I think bettering this dynamic is one of the really meaningful improvements we can make and achieve here inside of the AV500, and I will be doing a dedicated module just to talking about this relationship between consultants and AV integrators and talking about the roles in a bit more detail. Okay, design quotes. So I'm going to, this part I just kind of really want to go into a little bit of philosophy around AV designs. So we'll start with this one from Leonardo da Vinci. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And really with AV design, and with a lot of design in general, I think we should be looking to do more with less. the less boxes and stuff we have in our system, the less things there are to break, the less things there are to service, the less space we need, the less mounting we need, the less time it's going to take to install and deploy the system. So other than the above the cost of just buying less boxes, it's generally more affordable. Even if the hardware cost is a little bit more, it can be more cost effective overall, given the reduction in the overall processing of having more stuff in the system. So we should always be looking to simplify our systems while delivering on the required functionality. If I asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. A famous quote from Henry Ford, obviously the guy who invented the automobile. And there's often a difference between what a client asks for, what they want, and what they actually need. And this is really where we're getting a little bit more into consultancy here. This is where a good consultant comes in. But in short, make sure you really understand what the client is trying to do in this space, not just the stuff they're asking for. And it's a very easy trap to fall into, particularly if you have a confident client that says, yes, I just want one of those over there and one of those over there and one of those over there. It's very easy to go, okay, cool, we can give you what you're asking for and everyone will be happy. But you're missing a trick if you're not really understanding what they're trying to do, because there's a lot of nuance to this that there's a good chance that they may not be aware of when they give you a shopping list of the stuff they think they need. Creativity thrives best when constrained. Now, when I started my career in the UK, I was doing work for a very wealthy oil and gas industry, and then when I moved into residential, I was also doing work for some very wealthy bankers and celebrities and some mafia people. And in that environment, really the only thing we were concerned with is how do we make the very best system possible? And the price really just was the price. I moved out of that environment and came back to New Zealand, where people were a lot more, the cost was under a lot more scrutiny, let's say. And initially, I didn't really like that. That was a bit of a shock. I had to compromise on my designs. I had to compromise on my ideals. However, in time, I came to appreciate how much more creative I had to get in order to deliver the required functionality budget. I couldn't just use all Extron or Crestron or whatever the flavor was. I had to go through and find different products and be a lot more creative in how I piece things together. Now, were those systems better than the more expensive ones? Well, no, there was compromises that had to be made, but ultimately, I think constraints definitely make you a better designer, allow that to be a fuel for your creativity. User experience is paramount. Cliff Thorogood. I don't know if that's exactly what Cliff said. He's a good consultant who I had the pleasure to work with. He's here in the AV500. And when we're looking at all of those constraints before, you can deliver on all of that stuff. You can get the needs right, you can get the organizational objectives, you can design the system for the architecture, for the space, get all the technical stuff correct and tick all those boxes, and still deliver something that's lackluster as far as the user experience is concerned. Did you really think about sure, you've got that input plate on the wall, but where's someone going to put their laptop while they're plugging it in that position? These little user experience things, they're what people remember. They're what people interact with day to day. It's not all the cabling that's in the walls and the mounts and all that stuff. It's really about the human experience. And we're designing these systems for humans. And really you want to make sure that user experience is paramount. We want user-centric design. And finally, all input equals error. So this was an interesting comment made by Elon Musk when he was talking about the Tesla user interface. And whenever the user has to manually make an action, there is an opportunity to improve the user experience by trying to remove or automate that requirement. And I think this is really an interesting and great frame to consider when we start thinking about the user experience of AV control systems. Thank you very much. That is the end of this module. We've got another, I think we're going to do drawings next. So let's have a look at all the different kinds of AV drawings and what their purpose is.